Well, hello everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of Car on the Hauler, my post-race show. And I am Trackside Larry. A little bit late this week with getting it out. Some of you may know I was in Phoenix Raceway, so a little bit late getting this video out this week. But here we are now on a Wednesday talking about the races we had this weekend in Phoenix Raceway, and I will talk about the O'Reilly series. I'll even talk a little bit about my IndyCar, my first IndyCar experience with the Desert Double, or the Duel in the Desert, I think might sound a little better. And then we, of course, will talk about the NASCAR Cup Series. But before that, we will talk about our weekend winners briefly, and then obviously we'll talk about them more once we get to the O'Reilly Series and the NASCAR Cup Series. Go through our top 10 results and with our points update. So let's start with our weekend winners. Over in the O'Reilly Series, you had Justin Allgaier. Justin Allgaier, so amazing at Phoenix, probably his best racetrack. Is usually the favorite going into every race, but honestly wasn't the dominant driver in this race, and we will be talking about that a little bit later. And then in the NASCAR Cup Series, once again, not necessarily the dominant driver in Ryan Blaney, ended up taking the victory in the Straight Talk Wireless 500 at Phoenix Raceway this past weekend. Yeah, we had a great weekend of racing in Phoenix for the O'Reilly Series, the IndyCar Series, and the NASCAR Cup Series, all three of them putting on a very good show this past weekend. But let's now get to the top 10 results from the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series and the NASCAR Cup Series in Phoenix. Of course, you have your race winner, Justin Allgaier, Lil Gator, taking the victory. Was the favorite going in, is always really great at Phoenix Raceway. Came on late, came on at the right time, and got the victory. And then in second place, probably the dominant driver of the day, Jesse Love with the P2 finish. Of course, last year won the championship at Phoenix Raceway and came just short of getting the win this weekend. And then you have Carson Quaffle in third for Junior Motorsports. And then in fourth, Sheldon Creed. I thought he was going to win this thing with a couple of laps to go. It looked like he was going to take the dub. Ends up getting fourth alongside his teammate Sam Mayer in fifth. Then you have Sammy Smith back in sixth, the quiet run for him. And then Jeb Burton, fantastic weekend overall from Jeb Burton, was running top 10 all race long, started in ninth place. Just a great overall weekend for Jeb Burton. In eighth place, you had Raja Karuth, and Raja Karuth is definitely impressing so far this season, whether he's in the Jordan Anderson car or in the Junior Motorsports 88. And then in ninth, you had Corey Day. A great day from Corey Day. Once again, a really good day from Corey Day, showing his speed, and he has raced a bit cleaner over the last 2 weeks. And then you have Anthony Alfredo for Viking rounding out your top 10. And a big weekend for Alfredo because he also raced in the Cup Series for Hendrick Motorsports in the 48 for Alex Bowman. And hopefully Alex Bowman could get well soon. All right, now let's get to the top 10 results for the NASCAR Cup Series. We had Ryan Blaney with the victory. Overall, I'd say he was probably the second best car all day, and we'll talk in more in depth about it later. And then, in my opinion, the best car all day was Christopher Bell with the P2 finish. Kyle Larson, honestly, Kyle Larson was booty. He was not good for most of this race. Did not have a very strong car, did not have very good speed for most of this event. But at the end, they just hit it at the right time. And honestly, in those late laps, I thought he was going to steal a victory. Kind of pulled a little bit of a Kevin Harvick there, Kyle Larson did, but ended up getting a third place finish, so great day nonetheless. And then Baby Gibbs, Ty Gibbs, came just short of getting his first career victory. I was thinking in the late going that he could have a chance at it as well, but came just short of getting his first career victory. Rounding out your top five, you had Denny Hamlin. And Denny Hamlin, in my opinion, early on in the race, I felt like it was either going to be him or Bell. But Hamlin just honestly struggled for a decent part of the day for at least from a Denny Hamlin perspective. Wasn't as strong throughout most of the day. Had some issues on pit road, it seemed like, as well. Rounds out your top 5. Bubba Wallace. Bubba Wallace must have passed the most cars during the event, other than maybe Ryan Blaney. He drove through traffic all race long and just never really had the opportunity to get to the very front. Honestly, I felt like he had the third best car in the field, Bubba Wallace, but just didn't get up front at the right time. Ends up getting a 6th place finish. You had Willie B in 7th. Pretty quiet day from him. You had Tyler Reddick finally end his winning streak with an 8th place finish. And then in 9th, you had Michael McDowell, who was running top 10 pretty much all race long. And then Eric Jones. Eric Jones had a pretty good day. He was running top 15 most of the day. Ended up with the top 10. So good job for him. And a quick shout out to 11th place, not on here, that being Shane Van Gisbergen. He's continuing to improve on ovals. Yeah, there's some good stories within those top 10s from over the weekend. But now let's take a look at the points post Phoenix. Of course, there was no Craftsman Truck Series race this past weekend, so Chandler Smith is still your points leader, and Justin Haley is on the bubble. So let's take a look at the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series point standings update. We have a new points leader in Justin Allgaier, the new points leader, only 3 points above Jesse Love, and then Austin Hill and Allgaier switch spots essentially, while now Hill is 5 points back of Allgaier. So a close battle for the points lead there at the top. In 4th, you have, so 9th in the standings, you have Sam Mayer, who is 74 points back of the points lead. You have Parker Retzloff in 10th, 80 points back of the points lead. And then this is where it gets pretty close, as you have Brandon Jones, 89 points back of the points lead, only 1 point above the cut line. And then in 12th, you have Jeb Burton, who is tied with Taylor Gray on the cut line, but Jeb Burton does have the tiebreaker in 12th. Taylor Gray, like I said, tied with Jeb Burton. And then it's 14 points back until you get Brennan Poole. Now let's take a look at the Cup Series standings. Tyler Reddick, of course, still leading the point standings, having almost a full race on 2nd place. Ryan Blaney, 60 points back, and then 72 points back is Bubba Wallace. And then it's another big fallback, as 97 points separate Reddick and 4th place in the standings, Chase Elliott. So that is pretty crazy, a crazy note I did want to make. And also SVG not listed on here as well, 5th in points. So great start for Shane Van Gisbergen. And it's very close around this cut line at the moment. You have AJ Allmendinger currently 13th in points, 121 points back of the points lead. You have Carson Hocevar, 122 points back of the points lead. Ty Gibbs, 124 points back in 15th. And then on the cut line would be Brad Keselowski, 125 points back. And then Daniel Suarez is 2 points back of Brad Keselowski, 17th in points, dropped way back after this past weekend, was in the top 10 in points. And then in 18th in the standings, you have Ryan Preece, who is currently 8 points behind his teammate and owner, Brad Keselowski. All right, now that we are through the point standings, the results, the weekend winners, let's actually talk about the races themselves, the O'Reilly Series. I'll even talk a little bit about my IndyCar experience, my first ever IndyCar race, and then I will talk about the NASCAR Cup Series. So let's start with the O'Reilly Series race, the GovX 200. And it was a very entertaining race, I would say, from start to finish. The O'Reilly Series tends to put on a better show than the NASCAR Cup Series over these weekends usually. But this past weekend, I would say the Cup Series race was more entertaining than the O'Reilly Series race, but both were fairly entertaining. Jesse Love was the star of the show. He was dominating most of this race, just had a fantastic race from start to finish, but was unable to finish the job Allgaier turned it on at the right time. A couple other drivers I wanted to talk about would be Sheldon Creed and Sam Mayer, and maybe even Carson Quaffle you can throw into that mix. All of them seemed like they were going to have a potential good shot at the win, especially Sheldon Creed in the late going. I personally thought Sheldon Creed had it in the bag in that late going, and it just didn't quite work out for him and the 00 team, looking to get another win so quickly after his first win. And I think another win is coming for him pretty soon. But you got to feel for Jesse Love. Just a dominating performance. Looked as great as he did in the fall this past season, where he was very dominant in the championship race. And he was just kicking all sorts of ass, to be honest. Probably deserved the victory and didn't quite get it. And I'll be talking about something very similar in the Cup Series. But just overall, great day from Jesse Love. Great points day for Jesse Love. But now on to our winner, Justin Allgaier, who this is his best racetrack. This is Justin Allgaier's best racetrack. He's fantastic here. He's always the favorite when it comes to the media, when it comes to the sports books. Anytime we go to Phoenix Raceway, he is always the favorite. And he put it on at the right time. Honestly, for a good portion of this race, I didn't feel like he was as competitive as he usually is at Phoenix. I wouldn't have even considered him a top 3 car, maybe not even a top 5 car throughout a good portion of the day. But at the end of this race, with the late cautions and the strategies on pit road and everything, they just figured it out. I don't know if they figured it out with the setup, and that was the thing that pushed it over the edge, or it was just situational or what. But they were able to figure it out, and Justin Allgaier was able to get another win at Phoenix Raceway, a track that he always is just so very dominant at. And on this day, he didn't have a dominant day. You could argue he didn't have a top 3 or even a top 5 car throughout 80% of that race. But when he needed to turn it on, he turned it on. And a very clutch moment, I would say, from Justin Allgaier taking the victory in the GovX 200. But let me know your thoughts in the comments. How did you feel about Justin Allgaier's win at Phoenix? How you feel about Jesse Love completely dominating this race, but coming just short of getting the victory? And how do you feel about Sheldon Creed? Sheldon Creed, I felt like he was going to win there. It seemed like he had the right strategy, made the right call at the right time, and just didn't work out as I think he hoped. Still a top 5 finish. So let me know about all those in the comments. All right, real quickly before I get to the Cup Series race, which in my opinion was probably the best race we've seen at Phoenix Raceway ever, I do want to talk about the IndyCar Series real briefly, because this isn't necessarily an IndyCar channel. I do watch all motorsports. Some of them I'm more casual, and some I'm watching almost every race, or literally every race, like with NASCAR. This year I am trying to work a little bit better on getting into some of these more of these series. Like the other night I watched my first MotoGP race. I think they're in Taiwan, and I enjoyed that, and I think I'm going to continue to try to watch MotoGP. I've said many times on this channel I'm a huge fan of supercars. My boy Brody Kostecki won this past weekend. I was real happy about that. Formula One, they're the best drivers in the world. I don't really necessarily enjoy the racing, but they are the best drivers in the world. The cars are really cool and state of the art, even though it seems like the beginning of this year has been really bad for Formula One. The way this year has kind of started for not just Aston Martin, but all the teams. Seems like there's some issues over there. I'm trying to get into Supercross a little bit even. What else? I just got Flow Racing. You should go get Flow Racing while it's really cheap. It's really cheap right now, so you probably should go get that. So I like to watch the Cars Tour, ARCA a little bit. I watch some ARCA for sure, as long as it's not too bad. Sometimes it gets bad and I have to turn it off. But IndyCar Series, I like the IndyCar Series. I've watched the IndyCar Series my whole life. At times, I was a diehard, like when I was a kid and early teenager. Huge Danica Patrick fan, was a diehard Danica fan, followed her over to NASCAR. Liked her in NASCAR as well. I know she didn't really have the success and honestly fucked up a bunch of times, but she did have some decent moments in there as well, like Daytona 500 qualifying. She probably should have won Montreal. Then I moved on to Graham Rahal, and he's been my guy ever since. Love Graham Rahal. That's one thing I'll actually note real quickly. No Graham Rahal gear. There was no. I looked for Graham Rahal gear. I don't know if anybody was at the track. Didn't see any Graham Rahal gear. Just pretty much just Penske and Ganassi and all anything Aero McLaren that you could want. They had all of that. So that kind of disappointed me. Other than that, I really liked it. I enjoyed the racing. I recognized the paint scheme, so I was able to pick out which cars were which. Like for my buddy Corey, part of the Pace Car Boys, he kept on asking me like, who's that guy? Who's that guy? Oh, that's because you can't really. They're moving so fast, you can't see the numbers, and that's not really even a big knock. That's just me pointing out a fact. It's not really a complaint per se, because I was able to recognize 80 to 90% of those paint schemes, and by the end of the race, I knew who everybody was in the field. And I just enjoyed the race. It was really cool to see them just run around an oval, run as fast as they are around a track like Phoenix, because you have the speed in the Cup Series and the O'Reilly Series and the trucks. Then to see those Indy cars just zip around there like that, I think that's just really cool, really badass. I really liked the way NASCAR and IndyCar worked so well together all weekend. I thought that was really cool how well they work together, and it seems like a lot of drivers and personalities really want this to happen again, which I think is a great idea. I think IndyCar does really well on the ovals. I think there's definitely excuse me. I think there's definitely some ovals out there where the racing for IndyCar is extremely exciting, but at times it could be too dangerous, like Michigan, for example, or maybe even Las Vegas. You can throw into that, and Pocono, maybe even. You can maybe even say Indianapolis, but they're never going to stop going to Indianapolis. But you can maybe even throw them in there. I personally wouldn't include Texas on that sort of scale, but Texas is pretty dangerous as well. But seeing Indy cars on an oval, an open wheel car like that on an oval, I just love the way they're able to grip around that track and just zip around it the way they are. I just think it's freaking cool. It was great, a great day of racing. I'm on the edge of my seat pretty much every time I see someone get side by side in the Indy cars, because Indy cars race so much different than stock cars. It's very difficult to race side by side in open wheel cars, especially at that sort of speed. It's quite dangerous. There were some accidents over the weekend. We saw some accidents in practice and qualifying. There were some wrecks early on in the event. I enjoyed the IndyCar series. I really did. I really enjoyed seeing the IndyCar series in person for the first time, and I really hope that NASCAR, IndyCar, and Phoenix decide to do this again next year. I looked at the IndyCar ratings. It seems like the IndyCar ratings were way up. NASCAR ratings were very slightly up, not really a big impact on the Cup Series ratings, but the IndyCar Series ratings for Saturday, way up. So I thought that was really cool to see. So I think they're going to try to make this happen again. I think we're going to see more of these events. I think Phoenix will be back on the IndyCar schedule next year and working with the Cup Series, and I think we're going to do this with a couple races. Doing it with St. Pete, Phoenix. I could maybe see another road course like a Sonoma maybe being part of this or something. I'm not sure. But let me know your thoughts in the comments. How did you feel about the Desert Double Weekend? Was anybody there? Was it anybody else's first IndyCar race? Let me know in the comments. And should they do it again? Let me know. All right, now let's talk about the NASCAR Cup Series race at Phoenix Raceway. And in my opinion, this was the best race I've ever seen at Phoenix Raceway in the Cup Series. Last year's championship race, I think, was the best race. Obviously, I wasn't a fan of the way it ended, obviously. But other than that, I thought that was probably the best race we've ever seen at Phoenix. I think it just got one-upped by this past weekend in the Straight Talk Wireless 500. A fantastic race. The tires were awesome. The tires provided fall off. You saw some comers and goers throughout the field. That's one of the reasons why I thought Christopher Bell was so good, because he had such a great short run car, but he also had a really great long run car. It just seemed like his car didn't fall off like a lot of the other drivers. He was very fast. The tires were great. The tires were great. We saw a lot of strategy on pit road throughout the race, which was very cool to see. I do think the horsepower being up just a little bit this season, I think that made a big difference as well. The tires and the horsepower, I just think really provided some great racing. There was some incidents as well throughout the race, some pretty wild ones throughout the race as well. Just really hard racing at times. These cars were seemed like a little bit difficult to control, especially under braking and going through the dog leg. Seemed like they might have had some issues there. It was entertaining from start to finish. The whole race was just fantastic. A fantastic race, the best race I have ever seen at Phoenix Raceway. I hope they bring these tires back for the fall once again. The horsepower, I wouldn't mind it even going up more, because I think the horsepower definitely played a big role in why this race was just so fantastic. We had different strategies throughout the day. The two tires strategy at times seemed like it worked depending on the situation. At times it seemed like it didn't work. Tires just meant everything. It was a fantastic day of racing in the NASCAR Cup Series at Phoenix. Let me know your thoughts on the race we saw at Phoenix. But let's get to pretty much how this race actually really went. Christopher Bell, he was dominant. Christopher Bell was completely dominant. I felt very early on in that race that Christopher Bell was going to eventually take over from Penske, because Logano was leading early. You had Blaney up there early. Cindric started near the front, but obviously didn't finish up near the front and wasn't running up near the front throughout most of the day until he obviously got knocked out. But I really thought early on in this event that it was going to either be Christopher Bell or Denny Hamlin. Or very, very early on, I was thinking Denny. But later on that first run, it was very clear that Christopher Bell was one of the not the strongest car, but one of the strongest cars on the short run, and probably was the strongest car on the long run. Just phenomenal on that first run. I was able to see a lot from Christopher Bell. Just clearly had the dominant race car. Eventually got up to the race lead and led a whole bunch of this race. Led more than half of this race, actually. Just a fantastic race from Christopher Bell from start to pretty much finish. Didn't end up getting the victory. I think if you had maybe 2 more laps maybe, I think Christopher Bell probably would have won the race. Just ran out of time. Just ran out of time at the end of this thing. We had some cautions near the end. That cost him a little bit of time as well, and just was unable to get the victory. I definitely feel for C. Bell. He won this race last year. I don't think Phoenix is his best track. I'd probably give it to New Hampshire, but I would say it's probably his second best racetrack, or at least in his top three best racetracks. And I thought he was going to win going into it. He was my pick. He's who I thought was going to win, and I thought that his biggest competition was going to end up being Ryan Blaney. That ended up being true. I thought Ryan Blaney was probably the second best car in the field. Logano might have been the second best car, but with him leaving early, I kind of just excluded him from that. He left earlier on in the event, a pretty gnarly incident from Logano, a big hit to the wall. But I thought Blaney was the second best car, second best driver in the field on that day. I thought Bubba was probably the third best driver, but was just unable to ever get to the front. Had to start outside the top 25, drives up to the front, goes to the back, drives up to the front, goes to the back, and then eventually gets back up to the front. Maybe if he had another restart or two, I don't think he would have won, but he probably would have gotten a better finish than what he did. And I feel like those were the three best cars throughout the day. Ty Gibbs, I think, almost just really hit on a moment, and that was really cool to see from Ty Gibbs, a guy, me personally being a guy who doesn't really like Ty Gibbs. I don't like a lot of his antics. I've always been a huge fan of Joe Gibbs. Joe Gibbs Racing has always been My favorite race team, that's changed over the last year or so. They're not necessarily my favorite race team anymore, but I still have a lot of love in my heart for Joe Gibbs Racing. My favorite drivers have raced there, and I've tried my best to like Ty Gibbs, and he always just ruins it, to be honest. But when it came down to it, even though I talk pretty negatively sometimes about Ty Gibbs, when it came down to it, I was cheering for Ty Gibbs at the end of that race, which is something I never thought I'd say. But once we got into the moment, I'm like, yeah, I really want Ty to win this thing. That would have been very cool, especially that being where his dad passed. His dad passed away after Ty Gibbs won the Xfinity Series championship a couple of years ago. Fly getting in my face there. Won the Xfinity Series championship a couple years ago, and his dad passed away during his sleep that night. And that was very sad, and it would have been a pretty storybook moment for Ty Gibbs to finally get that first career win in the Cup Series and it be at Phoenix, of all places. I thought that would have been a very cool, probably extremely emotional situation, I would guess. So I found myself pulling for that in the late laps for sure. Didn't end up happening. He got passed late, and Ryan Blaney just pretty much drove away at the end of this thing. And then Christopher Bell finally got free, and he was marching him down. He was marching him down a couple of tenths a lap and just ran out of time. I'd say 2 laps maybe. If Christopher Bell was willing to get dirty, I would say 2 laps. But knowing Christopher Bell just isn't that sort of driver. I would say probably 3 laps. It would have taken him 3 extra laps or another restart. It would have taken Christopher Bell to get past him, and just ran out of time. Just ran out of time. Ryan Blaney just did all the right things at the end of that race. Jonathan Hassler, his crew chief, made the right calls at the end of that race. Unlike last week, I felt like last week Hassler really screwed him. I think they should have probably taken 2 tires at the end of that thing last week, and then they made the right calls this week on pit lane. It ends up putting Ryan Blaney in victory lane ultimately because he does something a little bit different on strategy. I'd say he probably finishes second and Christopher Bell wins, and found the way to beat Christopher Bell, a guy that I was considering unstoppable near the end of this race. But let me know your thoughts on Christopher Bell and everything leading up to the end of this race and the other contenders that we had on the field, including Ryan Blaney, who I am going to be talking about a little bit more here. But let me know your thoughts in the comments. So yeah, Ryan fucking Blaney, got the job done. I kind of talked about him a little bit in that last little segment, but I do want to talk about him a little bit more. Ryan Blaney, I think it's always good for NASCAR to have someone like Ryan Blaney go to victory lane. I consider Ryan Blaney to be one of the more popular drivers in the NASCAR fan base. I wouldn't say he is the most popular driver. I'd say he might be in the top 3 of most popular drivers. Hocevar is definitely giving him a run for his money right now, so he might not be in the top 3 right now. I'd say Elliott's number 1 for sure. Chastain's up there. Hocevar. So from that perspective, I think it's always pretty good to see Ryan Blaney go to victory lane. Even though this week, I think it was pretty predictable. You had Ryan Blaney and Christopher Bell in the top 2. I think that's pretty predictable for Phoenix. But nonetheless, I think it's always a good thing to see Ryan Blaney go to victory lane. And honestly, for the daily double, from the desert double perspective, I think it's really good that Blaney won as well. With the Penske representation, you had Joseph Newgarden win the IndyCar Series race. And you had Ryan Blaney win the Cup Series race, and also Newgarden was there wearing a Ryan Blaney shirt. So I think it really helps for the desert double conversation as well. And I do expect Ryan Blaney to probably be one of those primary championship contenders. Like I would say, it's going to be probably Reddick, Blaney. I could see Elliott, maybe Larson in there, Denny Hamlin. I think we have a couple of drivers that are going to be big time contenders. Maybe even Bubba Wallace. Bubba Wallace has started off the season fantastic. I felt like he's one of the best cars in Phoenix. performed at a track like Circuit of the Americas when he's not a road course racer. And then, of course, Daytona and Atlanta could have potentially won both of those races. So maybe Bubba Wallace you could even throw in the mix. I think there's 5 to 6 legitimate championship contenders strutting their stuff here early. Maybe even throw Logano in there, strutting their stuff here early on in the season. But let me know your thoughts in the comments about Ryan Blaney getting the victory at Phoenix Raceway in the Straight Talk Wireless 500 and what it means for Ryan Blaney and the rest of the season. All right, and that will do it for this week's edition of Car on the Hauler. Like I said, I apologize. I was a little bit late with it this week with me going to Phoenix. Once I got back from Phoenix, I didn't feel like doing. I was dead. I was dead tired, and I had to work. So I really didn't feel like doing it on Monday, and I couldn't really do it on Sunday, obviously, either being at the racetrack and having some fun. So couldn't do it there as well. But look out for my preview, Larry's Trackside teaser, because that will be coming out roughly around the same time as this video. So check that out as I'm previewing Las Vegas Motor Speedway. And I'll also be at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. But let me know your thoughts in the comments about everything we talked about here today. But for now, I'm Trackside Larry saying peace.